All right, you need me to turn my camera on?
Actually, we got it. We're okay. Thank you. I was trying to figure
Okay.
out what's wrong with my.
I mean, I'm here, but
Oh, no, I was just trying to figure out why I couldn't see anyone, but
okay.
we have the best IT team in the States. They fixed it. Good morning. Whoops. Good morning, Member Shockley. Thank you for joining this morning. Can you do a quick mic and camera check?
Yep. Good morning.
Oh, yes and yes. We have both visual and audio contact. Thank you. Good morning, Member Clifford. I see you've joined us this morning. Would you like to do a quick mic and camera check, please?
I have. Here's my mic and my camera. And to check my mic, I'm going to give a heads up that I've got to duck out for a short other meeting at about 10:30, but I'll be on as fast as I can. Thanks.
All right. And I did not see your camera. Can we get the camera one more time?
Yeah, it looks like it's on.
It's on. It's on. Great. Thank you. Got it.
Thanks.
All right, Chair Jamalian, it looks like we have quorum. There's still people jumping on, but we have reached quorum. So if you'd like to get it going, we can get it going.
Excellent. Let's start the meeting. Thank you.
Wonderful. So let's do a roll call. Let me do one more quick sweep down
Are
our.
we live then?
Yes, yes, sir.
Great.
Doing one quick sweep here just to make sure that we haven't got anybody else. Yep, it looks like we're good. So I'm going to call roll right now so we can get started.
That's great. Thank you, moderator.
And we know that you are here, Chair Jamalian. Amber Bauer. Member Frazier.
Here.
Member Christensen.
Here.
Member De La Rosa. Member Woolsey.
Here.
Dr. Brown. Jeremy Brown. Member Shockley.
Here.
Member Clifford.
I'm here.
Member Polson.
Here.
Member Tupy.
Here.
Sarah Payan. And we have two alternates, Matthew Maldonado and Matthew Broad. All right, we have quorum with 8, so we can get started.
Thank you. Before we get into today's agenda items, I'd like to take a moment and remind the committee that members of the public, the committee term is ending in August of this year. So the department is currently accepting applications for membership, and you can find that information on the department's website. With that, we're going to move on to item number 2. If you're aware that our Vice Chair, Kristen Nevedal, has joined the DCC in the role of the Public Engagement Manager. First, I'd like to thank you, Ms. Nevedal, on behalf of all of us here at the committee for your work and your services as Vice Chair. That being said, we do need to elect a new Vice Chair today. So the floor is open for nominations. Members, please, if you want to nominate yourself or another member, feel free to do so. Do we have any members that would be interested in the position of the Vice Chair? Maybe we should start that way. Oh, not everyone all at once. If we don't have a nomination today, which it appears to be the case, or what would the protocol be, if I may ask the DCC there?
Give it 1 second. I think our team is working on that question. Just a moment.
This is member 2B. I can volunteer for it if somebody else is willing.
Thank you, member Tupi. Do we have a motion on the floor to nominate member Tupi? Can I get a motion from somebody, please?
I'll make a motion to nominate member Tupi.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Woolsey, I'll second.
Thank you, member Woolsey. With that, could we please open up for public comment?
Absolutely. We're now taking public comment on this agenda item, the election of, or the appointment of member Tupi as the vice chair. So we would like to, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called into the meeting. All commenters will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and each member of the public will have 1 opportunity to speak on each agenda item. And with no further ado, may be real. I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Election for vice chair, does this stay in effect even through the summer? Or is this just until the summer, and then once summer comes, then someone else will be elected?
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any more public comment?
No, it doesn't look like this time that we have any more public comment on the agenda item number 2. Would you like to
Thank
close
you.
public comment?
Yes, we would like to close public comment and move on to the votes. If the moderator could please take the vote.
Certainly. All right. Chair Jamalian,
Aye.
Member Bauer. It's not here. Member Frazier,
Aye.
Member Christensen,
Aye.
Member De La Rosa, not here. Member Woolsey,
Whoops. Aye. Sorry about that.
Dr. Brown is here. I will bring her up in momentarily. Jeremy Brown. Here. Member Shockley,
Aye.
Member Clifford,
Aye.
Member Paulson,
Aye.
and Member Tooby.
I'll abstain.
Okay. And Member Pan. It looks like we have a vice chair. It looks like it has passed.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Welcome our new vice chair, member 2P. That concludes item number 2. Moving on to item number 3, review and possible approval of our last meeting's minutes. If the members would take a minute to study those, if there's any comments, edits, amendments, please feel free to voice those. They look pretty accurate to me. Do we have a motion to adapt or amend?
Member
Woolsey.
2B, I'll make a
Oh, sorry.
motion. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Woolsey, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that, member 2B.
Thank you, member 2P. 2P, moving on to public comment. Could we please open up for public comment?
You bet. We are now taking public comment on agenda item number 3, which is adoption of the meeting minutes. Do we have any public comment on this? If you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called in. All commenters will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and each member of the public will have 1 opportunity to speak on each agenda item. And with that, let me see if we have any commenters. Would anybody care to speak on this agenda item number 3? It looks like there are no comments on this. Would you like to open roll call for a vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Chair Jamalian,
Aye.
Amber Bauer is not here. Member Frazier,
Aye.
Member Christensen,
Aye.
Member De La Rosa is not here. Member Woolsey,
Aye.
Dr. Brown,
Aye.
Jeremy Brown is not here. Member Shockley,
Aye.
Member Clifford,
Oops, aye, sorry, I was trying to unmute there.
no problem. Member Paulson,
Aye.
Member Tupy,
Aye.
and Member Payan is not here. So it looks like we have the minutes have been approved.
Thank you. That concludes agenda item number 3. Moving on to agenda item number 4, public comments on items not on the agenda. I'd like to remind the public that any comments of items regarding items coming up later in the agenda should be held until then. This is solely for items that are not on today's agenda and that you would like to see on a future agenda. With that, could we please open up for public comment?
Absolutely. So we are now on agenda item number 4, which is items not on the agenda. So once again, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged in, or by pressing *3 if you've called in. And a reminder that all commenters will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. Each member of the public will have one opportunity to speak on this agenda item. And with that, we will go to our first comment, which is call-in user number 5. I have sent you a request to unmute. There you go. Go ahead, call-in user. All right, call-in user number 5. If you are on a phone, press *3. All right, I'm going to put you back on mute. If you want to raise your hand again, I'll call on you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that. So I made a public comment. I sent it in for today to be at least heard. So I actually run a company called 7 Points. I'm the CEO of the company. We run a mobile delivery service in the Central Valley, and it's really hindering our business to only be able to be allowed to run a $10,000 inventory limit. And so I'm asking if there's any chance that could get raised to $20,000 to allow us to try to operate in the black. We've been operating in the red because of these limitations, and we don't see any concern to our employees from safety perspective, nor do we see it to be a public safety issue as well. And so we're asking the board to consider raising the cannabis limit for mobile delivery.
Thank you. All right, Elizabeth O'Donnell, I have sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
I'd like to voice my concern that I feel the Department of Cannabis Control is failing our state and our children. And even though our laws require that cannabis companies and manufacturers do not make labels attractive to children, our licensed retail establishments abound with products that have teddy bears, cartoon characters, rainbows, and unicorns on the labels. And many children each year are poisoned by accidentally eating these products. And young middle schoolers are drawn to them because advertising works. Last year, Newsom vetoed the bipartisan legislation AB 1207 that is meant to strengthen enforcement against cannabis retailers and manufacturers selling products with advertising and labels attractive to children in our state. And Newsom said it wasn't necessary because the law already provides for enforcement, but that enforcement is not happening. And the Department of Cannabis Control needs to sweep through retail establishments and enforce these public health protections. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, call in user number 10. I have just sent you a request to unmute.
I believe I'm unmuted.
Yep.
My name is Michelle Leopold, and I was calling in with the same request that Mrs. O'Donnell just shared. I've talked to a member of the Cannabis Control Board, and they don't even have enough people to look at what's going on throughout the state. And then Gavin Newsom vetoed that bill. Sorry. Is that, I think I'm talking. The recording was talking to me. Hi. Anyway, Gavin Newsom thought that we already have this law in place. We already have the board, the people checking all of these cannabis candy items, but they can't even control the entire state, much less take on this additional responsibility that was being overlooked. So I definitely think there needs to be more support for the Cannabis Control Board for California, in especially child safety, because that was the impetus of that law that he vetoed, but it's not being enacted. I just went to a store yesterday and saw all sorts of packaging that would be very attractive for youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Draglow, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
I'm the owner of Draglow Cannabis Testing Lab. I'm a social equity applicant in the city of Long Beach. And, you know, we get on here and try to talk to DCC about these grants that were given to the cities that are not being given out to the applicants. We're sitting here in leases. We need money to move forward, and we're not able to get that. So what I would like for DCC to do some checks and balances with the funds, that the grants that are given to the city to give the social equity. It's not being disseminated. There's no grants that's available for me opening a testing lab, being the only social equity applicant in the city of Long Beach to open a testing lab. There are no funds available for me to move forward, but I'm in a lease for 5 years. I'm paying my lease and not able to move forward in my business. So I need this to be documented. I've talked to DCC a number of times and there's nothing being done. Do some checks and balances with the city, the Cannabis Oversight of Long Beach, and see what's going on with the grant. They receive over $8 million. 2 people made it through the system. One person is struggling, the other person, well, I really don't know. But we need to have some checks and balances done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanna, I've sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Joanna Cedar calling. This is a comment for the DCC, for the CAC, and for parents who are concerned about cannabinoid products getting into the hands of their children. Please stop conflating unregulated, intoxicating hemp with regulated cannabis. Many people have made a comment in both in meetings that the CAC has had in the past about intoxicating hemp. This board and the DCC has their head in the sand when it is on this topic. And it is vitally important that we start looking at this industry in terms of cannabinoid regulation, not hemp, not cannabis, but cannabinoid regulation. And we need to be thinking about process, about purity and potency. Okay. And none of those is reflective of cannabis or hemp regulation. Those are all reflected of cannabinoid regulation. Source is unimportant to the consumer. The consumer needs to understand process, potency, and purity. Okay, those are all three of those are handled within the regulated cannabis system. Unregulated intoxicating hemp falls outside of that system, and ignoring it only makes the problem worse. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kelly McCormick, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Oh, looks like Kelly, you dropped up. There you are. There you are.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd just like to agree with the previous callers and call for more enforcement of existing regulations on packaging and products appealing to youth after the very unfortunate veto of AB 1207. But since it was pointed out that the regulations are there, let's please actively enforce them. I'd also like to see a future agenda item on THC caps in edibles. I show a bag to parents when I do presentations of THC pretzels, and one pretzel is considered a serving. And there's cookies in which a quarter of the cookie is considered a serving. And most adults don't approach snack products that way, let alone children. And we know that at children's hospitals, the number of admissions for marijuana for children, with the average age of 3 being the number of children or the age of the children who are brought to the emergency department for overdosing on edibles, the number has skyrocketed, and this has to change. This is not healthy for our children or for our society. So please consider THC caps in edibles. Thank you.
Thank you. Cassandra Taliaferro, I just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. My name is Cassandra Taliaferro. I am a owner of a farm as well as a distribution company. Legal cannabis companies statewide are grappling with a surge in theft, heists, and burglaries, posing a significant threat to their survival. This alarming trend not only undermines the security of farms, distribution companies, and retailers, but also erodes the market value of legal cannabis sales. As the owner of a distribution company, I've witnessed firsthand the devastating impact of these organized and targeted crimes. Our company recently fell victim to one of the largest heists in our city's history. This meticulously planned operation resulted in the loss of 585 pounds of cannabis products with a total income loss and property damage of over $310,000. Affecting not only our business, but the 21 farms who rely on us, whose product was in our care and control, also fell victim. Despite mandatory reporting, the response from regulatory agencies like the DCC has been insufficient, leaving businesses to grapple with the aftermath alone. Despite the mandated measures in place, the city police station just 3 blocks away, we were left vulnerable and the thieves were still able to escape with their livelihood. The current reporting system for theft fails to acknowledge the severity of the situation, with the same form used for mundane administrative changes.
30
Furthermore, the ease of access to premise diagrams enables criminals to exploit vulnerabilities. Urgent action is needed to revamp security measures and restrict public access to sensitive information. Moreover, the financial burden on legal cannabis businesses is exacerbated by outdated fee structures that do not reflect the current market conditions. Many businesses operate at a loss and struggle to remain viable without access to grants or subsidies.
All right, thank you. Dale Gearinger, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
I just wanted to echo the comments that were made previously. about potent edibles. I was in a dispensary the other day where they had canned drinks lined up, and most of them were like 5 and 10 milligrams of THC. And then there was a bottle right next to them, same size, that had 100 milligrams in it. And there was really no warning about this at all. And I heard a lot of complaints from medical patients about the difficulty of discerning the proper dosage on medicines in general. So I would urge the DCC to review the situation with labeling of dosages uh, in general. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Take just a moment. Kelsey Fernandez, I've sent you a request to unmute. Kelsey Fernandez. All right, Kelsey, I'm going to lower your hand and then you can re-raise it when you are back. So next I'm going to go to May Be Real. I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Mariel Burrell with Giving All Glory and Honor to God. And I am a social equity applicant. I'm also a mother of 4. And I also do have provisional licenses. So my gripe today is with the provisional licenses and with cities being able to set up their own rules and regulations. So despite us, passing SB 51 and it going into law on the 1st of January, which is amazing, the city of Long Beach has decided that despite the state saying that I can operate and I'm legally able to and I have my metric credentials, they told me that if I do operate, that enforcement would happen toward me. Now, I've had my lease now for 2 years, have been in this building and have not made a single dollar in revenue and have a 6-year lease. And that's extremely difficult to be able to continue to stay afloat. Now, the city has received millions of dollars in grant funding. And to my knowledge, there are 0 people, 0 equity in the city of Long Beach right now that are currently licensed and operating. So the money that they have, though they do have the ability to give it to those that are actually in the race, they are not giving it. So I'm asking you all to please, as I asked before, to have some type of committee to check the cities and what rules and regulations that they are putting in place, especially if they contradict what the state says. If the state says that I can legally operate, but the city says that I cannot, and provisionals were put in place so that the cannabis industry did not fall down, then what good is it within the city? Also, they opened up dispensary licenses or the application back in 2022. Currently, there are 0 equity dispensaries in Long Beach. As of today, we still have no equity dispensaries in Long Beach. So if you all could please help with these different things, making sure that cities, especially if they're taking state grant funding, they receive money from GoBiz and whatever other agencies give out money. If you receive money from the state, you must abide by the state rules, or what good is it in you receiving millions of dollars if you're not actually helping equity to make it to the finish
Thank you.
line?
All right, Kelsey Fernandez, just sent you a request to unmute. Yay, there you go.
Here, thanks so much. Like the previous callers today and several callers at the last meeting you had, I'm commenting about the absence of enforcement of the Prop 64 regulations in the legal market as it relates to children. I'm going to share just a few quotes directly from Prop 64. The Prop 64 language promises to, quote unquote, protect children. Prop 64 also states that, quote, marijuana and marijuana products cannot be advertised or marketed towards children, unquote. And, quote, packages and labels shall not be made to be attractive to children, unquote. And then finally, marijuana products shall be not designed to be appealing to children or easily confused with commercially sold candy or foods that do not contain marijuana, unquote. And we all know the big players in the marijuana industry and the cannabis industry that are blatantly marketing to children and teens. They have products and advertising that appeals to young people, and it's intentional. And it's a big part of their market. When we saw the Cannabis Child Safety Act go through, there was big money being poured into legislation to fight it. So I urge this committee to outline what is being done to enforce these very, very clear regulations that are being defied by the cannabis industry. Please respond to the call that you've been hearing from the public and state what is being done in enforcement. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Paul Hansberry, I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go. Paul, you are unmuted. *3 on your phone. Okay, Paul, I'm going to put you back on mute, and if you just raise your hand again, we can work that out next on another round. So just going to unmute you or mute you and raise your hand again. All right, Becky Rapp, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Becky Rapp. All right, Deanna Garcia, I've sent you a request to unmute. Deanna, there you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Deanna Garcia. I am an equity applicant out of the city of Sacramento. All legal cannabis products are sold only to adults over the legal age. The packaging on all regulated legal cannabis products are labeled with the milligrams and the serving size. There is a large gray market that is still going on in the state of California, where the products look similar to the legal products that are not regulated products. They are not sold at legal cannabis dispensaries. They are sold almost anywhere. These products are the products that the children are getting. Also, hemp products are sold at gas stations and almost everywhere. Everywhere you can purchase hemp products, even your supermarket. These hemp products are just as powerful as THC products. They can be sold to anybody without a driver's license, without an ID. They can be sold anywhere except for dispensaries. The regulated cannabis businesses' products are receiving a bad name due to the hemp products and the unregulated cannabis market. We are taking the heavy bear. We are taking the heavy weight. We are paying the heavy fees. We are paying the outrageous taxes. We are dotting our I's and crossing our T's, but yet we still continue on being blamed for children being intoxicated by unregulated market and the hemp market. We ask for the state of California to please have mercy on us and realize it's not us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, Dominic, I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Analysis labs. We're a testing lab down in San Diego. Over the past few months, we've seen a lot of recalls. Appreciate the work that you do in DCC, but it also does not make sense that there was a voluntary recall for pesticides on 2 separate products. It just doesn't make sense that those products even made it to market in general. Part of this problem is definitely contributed to the fact that there are no action limits set for category 1 pesticides. Labs are artificially picking what their limit of detection is and are allowing samples to pass that should be failing. And that's why we end up in these recall situations. The state this year definitely needs to prioritize setting action limits on Category 1 pesticides. The information has already been presented and provided. Just listen to the peers in the industry and follow through. I also want to mention that COAs should be available to the public. As of right now, it is required for dispensaries to have them on hand and verify COAs when receiving products, but there's no way for a consumer to get access to that. It's up to the discretion of the dispensary or the brand to share the COAs. That should be changed. Consumers should be able to know what they are consuming and what's in their cannabis, if there's low-level contaminants or if it's completely non-detect, and just seeing the variety of cannabinoids in products as well, not just the THC and CBD that's required to be on the label. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Becky Rapp, I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
I just wanted to echo some of the previous callers as I appreciate them asking for a call to action regarding protecting our children from these high potency products. They come in colorful packaging and are flavored like candy, and cookies are just a few of the industry's obnoxious ways of targeting our kids. Recently, a young boy in San Diego County consumed 3 gummies while at school during lunch, and each gummy contained 400 milligrams of marijuana, totaling 1,200 milligrams of THC. This is appalling. He was rushed to the emergency room, and he was in a coma and almost lost his life. Unfortunately, our hospitals are seeing this significant surge, particularly Rady Children's Hospital. They are treating children for ingesting these products. And several years ago, there were only a few cases. And now they're seeing hundreds of cases annually. This is clearly a public health crisis. Our children are suffering, and I urge you to create or implement THC limits and removing any and all packaging that is attractive to young children. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a moment. All right, Paul Hansberry. I'm going to try this again. I sent you a request to unmute. There you go, Paul. Paul? Paul, you're unmuted, so can you try *3? Goodness. All right, I'm going to put you back on mute while we work that out. Annie Aubrey. There you go, Annie.
Hi, good morning. My name is Annie Aubrey. I am a retail operator, and I want to mirror some of these comments before that it is completely unfair to the regulated market that hemp products can have intoxicating cannabinoids without regulation, without labeling. And just to comment on that other caller, there's no such thing as a 400 milligram gummy in the regulated market. That is not a regulated product. So it is completely insane to me that we are competing and you're seeing businesses struggle and work their hardest to operate above board for no reason, because everybody can just go to their local stores and sell whatever they want. We really need something done about the hemp products that are just being sold to anybody for any reason at any strength without testing. We're begging you as an industry to help us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, you are unmuted, so testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Still not working. So we're going to move on to Kenneth. Kenneth, I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you for this opportunity to address the DCC board and staff. I wanted to lend you my concern as a parent here in the state of California. Due to the systematic regulatory failures, our state has experienced a proliferation of hundreds of legal cannabis products with characteristics of candies and foods known to be attractive to youth and children. And I know several speakers have spoke to this, and I wanted to lend my support that we do something about this. I was recently at a high school here in the city that I live in, and one of the assistant principals showed me a box of all the confiscated marijuana products that they had on campus in the past couple months. These products are super appealing to young people. I don't blame them for using these products. They're candy flavored, they're bright colors, there's soda cans, there's gummy bears, there's Rice Krispie treats, there's chips, there's cereals. All of these things are super appealing to our young people, and they're getting addicted to these highly potent products. The DCC can do more and should do more. Some of these products are legal and some aren't. We know that they're legal because they have the little logo on the packaging showing that they're a legal marijuana product. So both industries are to blame, both the legal and the black market, but it doesn't really matter. We need to remove all of these products, ensure that our kids are protected against these products that are so appealing to them. So please do more. We implore you to do more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Deanna Garcia, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Ooh. I'm sorry, Deanna. I cut you off there because it is one comment per agenda item. I apologize. We're going to move on to Lena. I've sent you a request to unmute. Go ahead, Lena.
Hi, my name is Lena. I am from the city of Fullerton. I work at a dispensary in Santa Ana. I am 51 years old and I have a 17-year-old son. I'm a little hot under the collar right now. Let me start by saying that I have educated my son on cannabis for the last 3 years that I have been in the business. Woo! I am angry. I have never understood why the responsibility of raising your children and teaching them and educating them about medicinal purposes of a plant is the job of people on a panel. We walk down the aisle of a supermarket and on both sides, refrigerator and non-refrigerated, is nothing but alcohol. Something that can be completely obtained by children of many ages. You have to go into a dispensary and have an ID.
30
21
seconds.
and year old. My point is that the illegal market and the licensed market are completely different. It is not the responsibility of this industry to raise and educate your children. If they are obtaining this, you need to look in within, not in the industry. My son is exposed to it, and yet he is educated. They are going to do what they're going to do. It is
Thank you.
not.
Thank you for your comment.
There you go.
Hi, this is Madeleine Armania. I'm the owner of Miss Maddie Delivery Service in Los Angeles. So for the kids, we have big issues with these kids because, you know, they're ordering through the weed maps on their parents' identification. Until we don't get to the address, we have no idea who ordered it. Sometimes they are like, please leave at the door. So we text them, sorry, this is cannabis product. We cannot leave at the door product. And then they're like, okay, please cancel it. I'm in a shower. So we have lots of similar cases about this. And also, one time I was attacked by a teenager who was about 14, 15 years old because he didn't got his product because he had fake ID, I believe his father's, because the address matched to the address I delivered. And he was not letting me to drive off my car. He was like blocking the way, trying to open my car door and screaming at me, why do I make such a drama while other drivers are giving him products and I don't give him? So that means there are lots of black market products and drivers who don't care. They sell to kids and then like we are the ones who are legals
30
in a
seconds.
fault. So maybe we can do something with that. That's also we're wasting our time to get to the customer and then come back. That's our time. And I don't know, that's a huge issue. And they're very aggressive, these kids. So maybe we can do something with it. Maybe parents can watch their kids so they don't steal their driver licenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Marco Troiani, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Marco, there you go.
Because I can save my comments relating to that for that section, if so.
Yes, please. If it relates, if it's relating to an agenda item that's already on this agenda, please hold your comment for that particular agenda item.
Fantastic. So I'll just address the item for this agenda item, which is things not on the agenda. I just wanted to bring up the issue of pesticide testing and contamination in the supply chain, which I think some other people have made comments on, and sort of ties into the other agenda item on cannabinoid inflation. But without a equal and objective basis for enforcement from the DCC to go after these labs that are doing any kind of inaccurate data, I'm afraid that we're going to see a big problem with contaminations. Like people have mentioned pesticides. I know residual solvents are also sometimes past the limits in some of these products. And so I want to draw the committee's attention to the need for things like state reference labs and explicit enforcement programs that give the DCC the authority to basically go after bad actors and more or less make an example of them so that the other actors, the other testing labs in the industry are disincentivized to manipulate any data. What we're seeing with pesticide contamination mirrors a case that we saw yesterday where a gentleman who ran a laboratory went to jail for 14 years for contaminating 800 patients with meningitis, 100 of which died. And I think that that level of seriousness and that level of consequence is what is needed. And that's why the FDA has a very enforceable program. And although I know the state is reluctant to play the bad guy, I think we need to follow that model if we don't want to see something similar happening with California cannabis products and the contaminants that should not be in them. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Miller, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Richard Miller? There you go.
State Director for American Alliance for Medical Cannabis. I want to thank you for having this meeting today. I also want to address some of the disparities that are in our industry regarding cannabis and people thinking that children are getting their cannabis from dispensaries. They cannot get their cannabis from dispensaries because all dispensaries are checking at the front door with licenses and again at the counter when purchasing that cannabis. It is the parents' responsibility to keep that cannabis away from the children. So that being said, we can rest assured that this cannabis is not being purchased from dispensaries, and in fact, that is being purchased from the unregulated market. And there are a lot of products out there in the unregulated market that do have the state seal showing that it's an illegal market. Rest assured, those products are not from the legal market, and that should be taken into consideration. Recently, at the California Cannabis Industry Association meeting and the National Cannabis Industry Association meeting here in Sacramento, we had a display table set up for products in the cannabis industry. Also, that for the alcohol industry. And it was disgusting to see the disparity that which the alcohol industry and the cigarette industry can get away with packaging and labeling, which does not occur at all and does target children. To be a prime example, we all know Sunny D is targeted towards children, yet alcohol is being sold in stores with alcohol targeting children. And those children do have access. They can pick that bottle up, stick it in their pocket, and right out the door. And security isn't going to do a thing about it. But yet we're targeting cannabis dispensaries for getting medicine to our patients, which the patients use, but somehow the children acquire. I don't believe that is occurring. I think it's in the responsibility of the parent to make sure those cannabis is not being used by the children, and that our industry protect our rights to safe packaging. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Anthony, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Anthony, you are unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. The only comment I wanted to bring up was first, thank you for that new data dashboard that's on the website. I think it's really helpful to see what's happening in the industry and where things are in terms of the flow of cannabis through. I think after doing some analysis of the numbers, I think there was some daunting information that can be derived from it, more specifically related to what's being grown and how much of it actually goes through to the retail. I think a lot of these problems, including the packaging and the access by children, comes from the illicit market, which is fueled by these burner distribution entities. And that, based on the information I'm looking from the data dashboard, it seems that there's perhaps about 80% of the amount of cannabis that's grown does not make its way to retail. Unless I'm misunderstanding the data, that's what it seems to be the case, where you have nearly 7 million pounds of cannabis, I think, for the first half of 2023, and a significant disproportional amount of cannabis actually being sold at retail. So you see a significant portion being grown with licensed cultivators, and none of it, or a significant portion of it, is not making its way to the retail side. And so you have this is a big diversion issue, and I'm not sure what's being done to combat that. And it seems to be the bane of the entire problem, right? If you look at the packaging and the access by children and things like that, this comes back down to where the cannabis is going in the end, from cultivation down to the retail store, and where is the missing amount of cannabis. And everybody knows that about 75% of the cannabis market in California is illicit, compared to the 25% for everybody who's conducting their business in compliance with DCC regulations. I think that's the biggest issue here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Haley A., I've sent you a request to unmute. Haley? There you go, Haley. Oop, hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Haley. I am a retail operator here in the state of California. I'm also a mother of 2 young girls, and I was wanting to speak to the issue of the children and regulating our edible dosages. And again, the issue is not regulated cannabis. The issue is the hemp market. My team brought to me a brand that used to be in our legal market and has since moved to the hemp market. And I was able to go online and purchase many THC items through drinks, gummies, flour. It was delivered to my front doorstep. My child could have just picked it up herself and been able to use it. There was never once a copy of my ID asked for. They never asked. All I had to do was click a button saying I was over the age of 21. When I purchased it, that was it. It was delivered to my doorstep through FedEx. So the legal market is not the issue. And I need the parents to hear us so that you can help us with this. We need your help. The regulated cannabis market is not your enemy. We also care about children. The hemp market being unregulated, where you can purchase it online, you can purchase it at a gas station, that is the issue right now. And that is where you will see a 400 milligram gummy. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Judy Strang, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Judy. There you go.
Thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts. I work as an educator, and we are faced with a very difficult situation of having a child harmed in our classroom. And I realize clearly that the hemp market, the intoxicating hemp market, needs to be regulated, and that's under the purview of the DCC. And I understand there's far more black markets than permitted markets. And I don't know what you can do about it. You clearly don't have enough money or agents to do the enforcement of the black market that would be necessary. And I can't imagine you ever will. But I do want to clearly describe to you, and we recognize children don't go into the retail marketplace in cannabis and buy these products, and they get it from some adult that wasn't paying any close enough attention. I'm sure they pay attention, but just not close enough. But I want you to clearly understand what happens when a child has the traumatic experience of ingesting marijuana at their school site. Their classmates see it. The whole school knows about it. The district is bombarded. And the message goes out through the entire cities where these school districts exist. That's a horrific thing to know a child is harmed to the extent that some of these children that have been shared with you. And what that means to everybody around it. This is a societal issue. The child ate that product because it looked like a candy. Where he got it, who missed the issue along the way that could have maybe interrupted that situation. Certainly for conversation, but understand the huge ramification to a society when this happens to a child. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Paul. I have just sent you a request to unmute.
Hello, does it work this time?
It does, sir. Hello.
Hi, this is Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. I'm just the opposite of the caller who called in from Long Beach about how restrictive the local jurisdiction was. I would like to, at least on a pilot level, for the DCC to give authorization to local jurisdictions to soften some of the regulations. In Mendocino County, in the Emerald Triangle, in rural communities, it's a very, very different world. And so the security measures and things like that that are required for manufacturing don't really apply, aren't really, it's just a waste of time and money for that, especially for the smaller operators. Having a micro business is impossible for someone who's a small operator. But the regulations were written for large industrial, well-funded people. The smaller mom and pops that want to be able to do things themselves because they don't get the respect from the distributors because they're too small. They can't make enough money. They can't send small packages to retailers because it's not worth their time or money to take it there. So having someone to be able to have a micro business without all the industrial regulations that are geared for them, and giving them the opportunity to tune for small operators, for small scale operators, to tune their micro business regulations to suit their constituents would go a really long way. So I hope this isn't falling on deaf ears one more time, but we will continue to advocate for this because we feel it's really necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, P. Walker 323. I've just sent you a request to unmute. P. Walker 323. All right, P. Walker 323. Just sent you another request. There you go.
Regarding Prop 64 and some earlier comments, as someone who works in public health, I want to reiterate some concerns. The whole idea of Prop 64 was safety. Legislation or legalization was supposed to make marijuana safe, we were told, but it just hasn't happened. Child-friendly marketing and packaging mentioned earlier exemplify this. I have 3 additional imminent concerns that I would ask this committee to address. First, THC caps. When other countries consider anything over 10% a hard drug, we really need to look at the science and consider the health and social impact of high potency THC, its link to psychosis in particular, and set some reasonable caps. The time has come. Also, serving sizes. We need better serving size definitions. Many people don't pay attention to these, certainly not youth or children who may accidentally come by product. And some people compare serving sizes with, or compare products they buy with regular food serving sizes, which doesn't work. So we definitely need better serving size definitions and warnings. And finally, contamination issues. It's been years and we still have very serious pesticide and other kinds of contamination. Falsified lab results are a problem and bad actor labs need to be addressed. Thank you for paying attention to these issues.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other comments on agenda item number 4? All right, Chair Jamali, it looks like there's no other comments. Would you like to close comment on agenda 4?
Yes, please. That concludes agenda item number 4. Moving on to agenda item number 5, we're going to get an update from the laboratory subcommittee. Chair Antonio Fraser will give an update what his findings in the subcommittee meetings were. With that, the floor is yours, Member Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with a short summary of the meeting. Decent participation as far as the amount of people came, but not as many people spoke. But that being said, have had some good comments submitted to us in between here and today. In general, for SB 544 related, the new method is being reported as expensive and restricts the innovation of labs that have been operating for quite some time. Even looking ahead, there was a comment that the 10% variance in high potency products is just too large. For instance, we're talking about flour now, we're trying to standardize it, and we have a 10% variance. That can be okay when you're dealing with low potency, but when you get into concentrates, a 90% THC can be labeled anywhere from 99 to like 80 to 81. And that's just unclear and also aligns with the concerns about dosage that we've heard on these calls here already from the public. There's also a strong desire and push to set a action limit for category 1 pesticides still, although it wasn't on our topic agenda. It did come up again, and we heard some people talking about the varying levels of pesticides in the legal market. There was also still a very strong push to establish a quarterly meeting with the DCC in the lab so that therefore, as these things get rolled out, there can be updates, firm conversations to hold accountability to these things, and for the DCC does not have to go lab by lab telling everybody what they're doing wrong. They can update everybody at one time and expect the entire industry to get in line with what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. And along with that comes with hopefully more transparency to embargoes and the recalls that are happening. One thing you're not seeing with this information is what lab tested it and what exactly was the issue. If it was pesticides, are they saying that pesticides were found on the shelf but not in the lab sample, or how did it go on so people can, especially brands, can figure out how to evaluate their risk for dealing with certain labs? As we know, embargoes and recalls can be fatal to some people's brands, and if they believe they're operating with a licensed lab, they wouldn't think that there's an issue. But if there's more oversight, enforcement, and clarity of what's happening, maybe people can avoid some of these pitfalls that we've been hearing about. Next, I'll go into the suggestions around SB 544, some of the things that I want to move forward with, present to the committee for discussion. But after I present them, we're probably best to go to public comment, get some more feedback from the public, and then discuss as a committee as we finalize these recommendations. So what I'll do, I'll read out the recommendation and then go into maybe a few points about some of the things that were discussed and why we want to do so. I just want to be clear that I'm trying to present changes that the DCC can then mold in the structure that they have to, as opposed to some of the labs are very direct. Oh, it should be this way. Well, I don't think that's fair either, because your lab says it's one way doesn't mean every lab should do it the exact same way. So trying to frame these things in a way that the DCC can take and apply to everybody, but at the same time give a little context to what's going on. So first and foremost, number one is going to be in the new method, there's a requirement to run the initial extract or filter it. What that means in high level terms is that you're putting pretty much the raw extract onto your instrument, which is going to be way out of your calibration range for THCA, which is what the majority of flower is. So then it requires a second dilution to be run in order to actually quantify results. Well, the problem is that if labs can meet LODQ requirements by their dilutions, they shouldn't have to run that initial sample. It's never analyzed. It's never really relevant to the data that's going to end up being packaged and sent to them. So you're putting an extra cost, time, and burden on the laboratory. Not only are their supplies being wasted, but you're pretty much blowing up the instrument column, so to speak, by putting something that's highly concentrated in it, which will cause more wear and tear and eventually cause more instrument issues for the people running their laboratories by the rules. The other part of that is that if the requirement is to, or if the requirement is there for auditing purposes, right, to see what the first thing was versus the dilution to make sure that they align properly, that can be done by pulling samples instead with some more feedback there. So the very first recommendation is to adjust or remove the requirement to run the initial extract or filter it, especially if the lab knows that their LOD and Qs will be met through their dilution. That's all available to the DCC through their lab study. They should not have to run those two dilution steps. Again, adding more cost and burden to a licensed lab that wants to do it right, by the way. So there's only labs that are being audited to a level that are having to do this the right way. Hopefully everyone is, but we know there's still differences in operation.
And could you just like shortly elaborate on what that does to the instrumentation so the public can just have an idea of what the burden of this step is? Because it sounds like if you're throwing a raw extract or into an HPLC or whatever kind of machine, that it's probably not laid out to handle that kind of material.
Yeah, I think you're testing my education and my Mr. Rogers analogies, but you said it pretty well there. Putting the raw extract, these instruments are not reading. They literally cannot read that high level of the raw extract, so you have to dilute it down in some type of solvent and then inject it again, which again is more time, more money, and more labor to do so, and potentially putting things that are harmed on your instrument, especially in a production lab. I get it. The DCC probably is a much slower pace than most other labs, so they're not maybe considering some of this. But in production lab, that's going to add more cost, maintenance, and damage to your instruments operating that way.
Yeah, that's my understanding from the labs we spoke to. They said it's a real burden on the machines as well. Thank you.
Absolutely is. The second one would be the second recommendation would be to adjust the LCS requirement to not include every analyte or move strictly to a matrix post spike a post matrix dilution spike. What that means is that one, currently with the levels required to put the standards, all of your cannabinoid standards at a pre-extraction level, then move it through your extraction is extremely is a very high burden for your cost and your time. It's not really doing anything different than what a post matrix spike would, because when you spike cannabinoids on top of a matrix, it's not like you're extracting them from the matrix to begin with. So you don't really have a good way of verifying the extraction as is, but now you've added extreme cost burden to the labs to have to run it this way. And this has always been the intent of the regulations, which is one of those interesting points to me. It's always been the intent of the LCS, but now that it's being enforced, a lot of these labs are experiencing this increased cost and have a good bit of issue with it. So it's good that there's a level playing field now, but it is unnecessary in that sense to have to run that much of every single cannabinoid through the extraction. Now, other states have required you to run one or two, depending on what the requirements are, analytes to represent the entire requirement. That way, you're not putting as much, standard concentrated standards into your LCS extraction, but you're still doing the same thing. You're still going through the entire process as the regulation is intended to, but it's the same idea, and you get the same results with a lot less cost to the labs. I've been hearing some people say it's now about $80 per LCS sample. That could break it down to 10 if you were able to just run one analyte. So it's not a little difference. If anyone knows, potency testing started at like $100 when we first got going. Now it's down to $50. So we already understand now that that cost is a very big deal to labs trying to survive and keep their bottom line as low as possible. If there's no questions on that, I'll move to the third recommendation here, which is going to be increase the minimum weight for samples. Right now, it is at 200 milligrams. That is not enough to really have a representative sample of flower. It used to be half a gram. A lot of labs want to go back to a half a gram because it will lead to less variability. If you allow the lab to only extract 200 milligrams, no matter how homogeneous you want to be, keef will always fall to the bottom. It is a smaller particle size than the rest of the flower, and you are actually allowing people to grab just keef and do it consistently because there's not that much material required. Now, if you made people extract more material, there'll be more plant material involved, and therefore lower the level of variability between different samples being run. So the idea is to increase the sample volume, but also put a tolerance on it. Right now, there's been feedback that labs are getting pinged or dinged for not having exactly 200 milligrams in their with that they extract, and that's just a burden on production. There's no lab that operates that way. There should be an acceptable range for the weight that you can measure to extract, and then you use the exact measured weight for your calculation. So essentially, there should be a range of maybe 190 milligrams to 210, or if you want it to all be above 200, 200 to 220, but there shouldn't be an exact number because that's a huge burden on production. Anyone knows anything about static electricity and fine cannabis, it's going to get really messy and hard to actually operate. So certain things when you deal with high volume production labs, these things are a problem, and you're going to lead to, I'll just say honestly, probably disencouraging lab people to do it the right way. You're probably disencouraging the lower level employees who are going to be burdened to measure exactly 200 milligrams every time. They're going to be more likely to flub numbers because it's an unrealistic requirement, and therefore take the rest of the process less serious, and maybe fall adhere to some of the pressure from their bosses or clients to fudge numbers because they're thinking, well, this is BS to begin with. I might as well keep my clients happy. So when you have people that want to do good science, you should not overburden them to do things that make no sense and don't feed towards the end goal, which is a standardized potency method. The last suggestion is a more general one, but is there should be some type of equivalency criteria for labs to be able to use their own method they've developed over the years, and whether that be one acid method or a neutral method, all in the same one, different cal points, different mobile phase extraction. For instance, right now with the ACN, the acetonitrile required on extraction, a lot of people have methanol only extraction for flower, which is totally sufficient. But now you're adding a higher cost solvent to be in there only at 20%, but it's still added cost when it's not necessary, when they've proven through years and years of operation that they could meet the DCC's requirements, if not better. So go ahead and set those requirements for equivalency so labs can then conduct those studies and show that their own methods that can probably save time, a lot of money. 15 minutes of sonication is a lot of time and probably unnecessary. Let someone do their own work in a lab to prove that they can do that in a more efficient manner and allow them to use it. If someone doesn't want to be more efficient, or bring those things down and let them run the published method as is. But there definitely should be ways for cannabis labs to not only innovate and stay ahead with the science, but also keep their costs down from burdensome requirements. So those are my four. There were definitely a lot more comments. Appreciate everyone's contribution to it and some of their feedback. But those are the four that I've decided to move forward with the committee. We'll love to open it to the committee, talk, public comment, whichever order that you see best there, Chair.
I think it's best that we have the committee discussion first. If we have any motions, then on the floor, we can open for public comment. I've heard from labs as well that the 200 milligram sample size is just very difficult to make it reflective of the whole batch. But at the same time, we do know that we were getting a reputation in California for inflating THC. So would you say that labs that would develop their, equivalency criteria, what if they're then suddenly testing again 10% higher than what the state standard was? Is that a real danger that we're running, that they would?
Simply off of the sample size you're saying, or in general, what happens if someone is known to be
Both.
testing?
If we increase the sample size and we establish an equivalency criteria, do we run the danger of going right back to where we were before we standardized testing?
Well, ultimately, everything comes down to enforcement and oversight. Even within the current rules, if you do these 200 milligrams or you do the DCC method, you can still cheat if you care to. Hopefully
Yeah,
that's
that's
not
what
the
I'm
case.
asking. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, so the idea with some of these suggestions is to allow good labs to be good labs, but ultimately we need oversight. And I love what the DCC has done, because if you standardize the method, everyone should be doing something similar. So when they come into your lab, it shouldn't be them trying to figure out what you're doing. It should be more about, okay, you're doing this, or maybe a different version of this. And then they still be able to have the confidence that you're, testing things as you say you are. Yeah, that'd be my feedback there. We definitely have to have oversight. We need more shelf shopping, as they seem to have been doing with the recalls and some of the embargoes that may not be public, but are certainly happening. But it seems like there is some level of increased oversight, but now we just need to hone in on this, because the other part of it is that as a brand, you don't want to see different lab results everywhere you go. I mean, and maybe some people do because they're looking for something, but I know for most people, when they say, like, I don't want to deal with sending things to different labs to get different results. I want labs to be consistent, and that's what the 500 or the larger sample size will do. It will decrease variability if you require a more representative sample.
But how do we educate brands on these embargoes and these recalls when they happen? I don't often the brand didn't know it was a contaminated product because the lab tried to help them, tried to do something for their client,
Whatever, right? Yeah.
and whatever they did, right? But the burden of the embargo and the recall is on the brand. And like you said earlier, some of these brands will go out of business with one recall, right? So is there any consideration around how the DCC can the burden or the fine or the embargo cost be put on the lab versus the brand? Was there any discussion around that?
Not specifically, because I think that's outside of the scope of SB 544 and the standardized method, but I do agree that more transparency when these recalls or embargoes happen would be helpful to educate the brands on, who may be under scrutiny in a certain way. And it's not necessarily to shame the lab, but it's to allow the brand to have a conversation. Hey, I saw this. Can you explain to me what happened so I can either protect myself against it, or I may have to find a different partner. But right now, with the ambiguity and the rumors and whatever this industry currently sits at, so many different stories are told that brands really don't know. They don't get to learn from anyone else's mistakes. They have to fall into the same hole before they actually get a chance to learn, or they actually listen, I guess, hard enough to learn what's really going on.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Do any of the other committee members have any suggestions, any questions? I think the goal is to adopt these 4 recommendations. Once we have the public's input, we'd like to adopt them and pass them on. Is that correct, Member Frazier?
That is what I would like to do. But obviously, any feedback, changes, criticism is what we're here for today, from the public included.
Yeah, so the floor is open. If the members have no input, then I would open up for public comment,
I have
but I assume we do.
Member Woolsey, I have a couple of questions, and I think somebody else does too.
Please. Yeah, I can't see hands raised, so you have to just kind of yell at me.
I'll go ahead and I'll defer to Member Christensen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just a clarifying point. So for the laboratories that would be doing a laboratory developed test, would they then be using the state reference laboratory to ensure that there's continuity in the results, and that the laboratory developed test was similar to what is expected? What would like the standard test?
I believe the DCC is doing that. The private labs themselves do not utilize the state reference lab, but I believe the DCC is the intent is to pull samples and then send it to their own labs to kind of referee and get an idea of is this lab potentially inflating data or missing pesticides. We're talking about potency specifically now, but I do believe that's part of the DCC's oversight. That's part of their program.
I think Member Christensen is saying if we do pass on the recommendation about your own equivalency criteria, what's the benchmark? Is that going to be submitted to the lab to see if they actually coincide? Is that correct?
Yes. Sorry, yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, so everything that, if you're an approved lab, right now everyone testing for flower is on an approved list by the DCC. That means they've submitted all this data to one, show that they have a method that suits what the DCC requires. And if there was an equivalency, they have to do the same thing. They would have to show the DCC what they're doing, why the changes, still meet the requirements of the method, and some things may not be up for option. So that's why I left it open for the DCC to figure out which things they can potentially create equivalency for versus what things are going to be hard requirements. And maybe it's all of it's going to be a hard requirement and no equivalency ever. But I do believe from even my experience and listening to people that there is a cost production and a staunch on ingenuity when you're running this method. It's just not up to speed with what's out there currently that labs are doing. That labs are doing well too. I mean, when we say equivalent method, it's not like the lab is trying to make the data look different. There's been actually published data from labs that they're showing that, hey, my own method does the exact same thing the one that you made me do. It's just cheaper, faster, and everything else that I need to run a good business.
Yeah. And sometimes more accurate in capturing cannabinoids that the current new standard doesn't capture. Isn't that one of the parts of innovation that you were talking about?
Precisely, like trying to run 17 cannabinoids or 16, going back up to those numbers are going to be tricky if you follow this method to the T, maybe for co-illusion or different reasons. But people are pretty much having to redevelop what they already did to try to meet theirs versus being able to use what they've already done over time, money, sweat, and blood. They could use that and get the same numbers. It's pretty much what it comes down to. And you just have to define that as an agency of how they can prove they get the same answer that you're going to get. And that's what it comes down to. There's no perfect answer. I don't think we're going to have a recommendation with all the different things laid out like that. That's why I'm trying to leave it to a way, well, if they want to consider equivalency, let's consider how they wrote this, what they believe is most important, what can or can't change, so they can develop that. That would be a much longer, I think, term suggestion that some of the other things are way simpler and just make more common sense. So it's definitely a harder request, but it's for the sake of the business, the lab staying in business, and also continuing to push the science to a good place.
Thank you.
All right, so I have two questions. I'll start with the equivalency, and there were some comments made that we need standards, but then equivalency would be something the way you could do your own thing, so it really wouldn't be a standard of all the labs. So how would you propose that those two seemingly conflicting statements or desires, flesh out, and would the equivalency be something that they would have to prove to the DCC before they could do that method, and then if the DCC agreed, then they would be able to do something different?
Yeah, so first and foremost, everything would have to be pre-approved, right? You can't just come up and say, I have an equivalent method and I'm going to run it. It would have to be data submitted, and there's what you call a validation or verification package that has to be put together. This would be a validation package, a total end-to-end detailed process to tell the DCC what you're doing when the sample comes to your door, when you extract it, put it on your instrument, how you review your data, and how that raw data looks. So they would have to send all that up to them and them approve it. And what I'm asking the DCC to do is create that criteria so people can start developing those developing methods that meet the way that they want to see that equivalency. Now, as far as standardization and equivalency go, you can do both still. So other industries, I mean, you got to think about with these instruments, everyone's using different manufacturers. I mean, they're trying to standardize more inside the instrument with pressure columns and whatnot, but you can get the same answer doing it different ways. And, you know, and some of it comes down to, oh, I have a method where I can extract without a 15-minute sonification requirement, you know, and I can get the exact same answer as you. So it's more about finding little things to create efficiencies that we know um, from having experience with the cannabis plant. Whereas if you're writing a general thing, you would say, yes, you should sonicate for 15 minutes because that way you know everything is crashed out regardless of what the heck you're dealing with. So I think these things are written in a way more academic where, hey, we know if you do this, you have accomplished this step. But with people that have been in cannabis for some time, um, they understand that, hey, that's not required. You know, or if I use this polarized solvent, I don't have to do all that. So it's more about people that have the experience to know that I'll get the same answer as the DCC. They want to submit that method. As soon as the data starts looking different between the DCC method and theirs, then there's a problem and it shouldn't be approved.
Okay.
So that's the end goal. Like when you set the equivalency criteria, it's mostly to ensure that you're going to get the same answer you would have if you used the DCC's method.
Sure. And generally speaking, I would support things that allow labs or any part of the industry really to be more efficient and lower cost, because lower costs get passed on to the consumer, and we already know the consumers are competing against an illegal market that has already a low cost. So I get that, and I appreciate where you're coming from. My other question relates to more of the first 1 and 2 recommendations that you had. Do you know, or can someone from the DCC perhaps explain why does the DCC do it the way they do it now? So if you're proposing a change from something, I don't understand. I'm not a lab person. I don't understand why the DCC created what they have now. So before I could advocate for a change from that, I'd want to know, well, why do they do it that way?
Yeah, that's
Or
a
if you know
great
the
question.
answer, or if someone else does.
Yeah, so I don't have that exact answer. They do put out a statement of reasons. So they did put out a statement of reasons when they made the spec, and they allow for feedback and comment on all the official submitted comments and why or maybe not it didn't matter. But as far as how it was developed, that I really don't have an answer for. And I think that's one of the feedback we got is that, hey, a lot of these states have a lab working group where they talk about these things and take input from the actual operators and try to make one. But the DCC did it on its own and then published it. So there was a lot of pushback. And the reason why this rollout was, I think, a year or so behind schedule is because of that pushback. There was a lot of very valid pushback on the method. This was initially meant to deal with edibles and things, and it would have never, ever worked. So that's where the labs, I believe, also have a strong opinion, because they realized the first draft of this would have pretty much allowed for talking about overdosing, like to try to extract chocolates way that they were asking originally. You would have had a 50-gram edibles reading at 10, and that's what you would have had. And the DC listened and changed it, but that was the first attempt at this. And I think that's why some of the labs are very staunch and dug in their position of, hey, you need to listen to us as well, because you almost sent us down a crazy path the first time you tried to roll this out. But I give the DCC great credit for listening and taking out some of the more egregious things. Now we have more of, like you said, a inefficiency problem than we do a bad science problem.
Okay, and I thought of one more thing. So I heard from one of our businesses that there were a bunch of labs that were closed, and that has created a bottleneck to a degree in getting product tested. Do you know anything about those closures, and if these recommendations would have helped alleviate some of that particular problem?
I say this, I'm not the DCC, so you can't take this, but my understanding is that these labs are closing. The ones that are getting shut down are being shut down because the things they're doing were against these regulations. So they're being closed because they aren't doing the things that they need to do to clean up their act, so to speak. So I don't think there is a capacity issue in the state. If you look at the states that are open, some of these labs are monsters. Some of these labs have 4 or 5 sets of equipment. They could do 20% of the state themselves if they had the opportunity. What I think you're hearing is that people having to change their production flow and being frustrated with where they end up. And that lab may be slower because now they're being slammed or inundated with samples. But there's a lot of labs out there that have zero to no volume, essentially. So I don't think there's a capacity issue. I think you're dealing with the frustration of people having to unlearn bad habits, would be my guess at that. But I don't really know what they're talking about or which labs they're referring to when they say closed. Some labs, unfortunately, have closed because they couldn't get enough business trying to do it right. That's also been an issue.
I think the DCC can, Vice Chair Woolsey, I think what you're referring to is there was a certain number of revocations of licenses that were egregious actors, from my understanding, but there is a bottleneck in labs that are transferring to or coming into compliance with the new standards. So we did go from, I don't know, 38 labs that were testing flowers down to 12, but every couple of days, another one comes back online. That did create a bottleneck that we experienced firsthand at our company as well. But I think that's being mitigated and it's moving along the pipeline. Maybe one of the attendees from the DCC could shed a little light on the rollout of the new standards and how that impacted some of the licensees.
There was certainly only like 9 the first day they released the list, but it quickly rose to 20 plus in about 2 weeks later. So there was a threat of capacity, but I think, yeah, like people dealt with issues. There's no doubt there were issues, but I do believe there's enough capacity out there now to service the market.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much almost caught up. Yeah.
Would these recommendations create loopholes for bad actors to operate?
Not these recommendations are trying to actually bring standardization tighter. But ultimately all this comes down to enforcement and oversight. You can take this method the DCC put out, do it letter for letter, and there's still ways to inflate potency. It's more about coming behind the labs and ensuring that the numbers that they put out are truly numbers that they were able to calculate honestly in their labs. And my understanding that is happening. I'm hearing a lot more, in-person lab audits pulling things out of their retention, which means the samples, like say you tested a flower and it was 38%, the DCC may show up to your lab and say, hey, I'd like to see the rest of that flower, and we're going to take it back to our lab and verify what results you got. So the main thing that's going to stop any of this there is definitely going to be enforcement and oversight. And my understanding that's definitely picked up over the last 6 months versus where we were years ago when we were seeing 50% flour and 40% non-infused pre-rolls. So these things just need to go away because they don't exist. And I'm sorry to any brand that labels their products as such, but right now you're dealing with fairy data at this point.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions, suggestions from committee members? Well, I'd like to point out that I really appreciate your approach, Member Fraser. I think that keeping these sort of broad and creating a pathway for the labs to work with the DCC to come up with a solution is probably the most realistic approach. So I would actually like to see if we can get a motion to adopt these as is so we can open up for public comment. If we get a public comment that will really move us to change anything, we can change and go back to public comment. But I think it seems like the laboratory subcommittee did a pretty good job in formulating these recommendations. So I think they're great. But again, if we have a motion to adopt,
I'll make
then
a motion to adopt.
thank you. Do we have a second?
I second, Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. With that, could we open up for public comment, please?
Absolutely. All right, we are now taking public comment on agenda item number 5, which is an update from the laboratory. Oh, actually, I need you to read the recommendations first for the record.
Absolutely. Let me get my camera back on.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, God.
I am so sorry to interrupt. I am the note taker. If you could please just clearly state each of the 4 recommendations clearly and slowly so that I can write them down and we will have them restated for the record.
Okay. The first suggestion is going to be remove the requirement to run the initial extract or filter it. This is essentially removing the dual dilution requirement, could be another way to write it.
So that is remove the requirement to run the initial extraction or filtrate
Yes, correct.
or removing the dual dilution requirement.
Yes.
Thank you. That is recommendation number 1.
Recommendation number 2 is going to be adjust the LCS requirement to not include every analyte or move strictly to a matrix post-dilution spike.
Okay, reading that back. Adjust the LCS requirement to not require every analyte or move strictly to a matrix post-dilution spike.
Correct. Number 3 is going to be increase the minimum sample weight to 500 milligrams and include an acceptable range for the mass. Right now it's an exact number.
Okay, that is increase the minimum sample weight to 500 milligrams and include an acceptable range for the mass.
Correct.
Excellent, thank you.
And then number 4 will be set an equivalency criteria so that labs may use their own methods while honoring the intent of SB 544. Just want to be clear that we're not trying to, go away from the intent, but just allow people to establish an equivalency criteria so labs can use their own methods while honoring the intent of SB 544.
Okay, set an equivalency criteria so that labs may use their own methods while honoring the intent of SB 544.
Correct.
All right, those are our 4 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, could we go to public comment, please?
So we are once again going to open public comment for agenda item number 5. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged onto the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called into the meeting. Each commenter will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and each member of the public will have 1 opportunity to speak on this agenda item. So with that, we're going to go to our first commenter, which is call-in user number 25. Call-in user 25, *3. Okay. That person has dropped off, so we're going to go to Sarah Otis. Sarah Otis, I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Director of Quality for Anresco Laboratories, and thank you very much for these 4 items. I'm in full agreement with these, but I will say that on number 4, set an equivalency criteria so labs can use their own method. In section 15713 of the DCC regulations, they already set out criteria for validation of test methods. They require that labs follow the guidelines set forth in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's guidelines for the validation of chemical methods. And so those criteria are already laid out. Labs that are operating in compliance would have already followed these method validation guidelines for any previous methods they were using for potency analysis, and may already have these types of validations completed. I think the issue is that because labs were allowed to operate with provisional licenses, the DCC hadn't been reviewing these method validations. And so labs were able to operate without any review or oversight over their method validations. And as labs start to transition to annual, the DCC hopefully will be reviewing them and enforcing the requirements for method validation. But these criteria could be used also for when labs want to use a internally developed and validated method for potency analysis of flour and non-infused pre-rolls. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dominic, I've sent you a request to unmute.
Hi there, my name is Dominic. I work with Infinite Cal Laboratory in San Diego. We agree with and would like all 4 of these recommendations to go through. To reassure the members of the panel, if it's a good lab, getting equivalent results to the DCC potency method is easily accomplishable. We've ran nearly 150 samples side by side and are seeing on average about a plus or minus 2% variance, way less than the plus or minus 10% that's allowed in the regulations. So it's definitely achievable. Few other points to reiterate along with these recommendations is just allowing for variants. The ACN methanol 80 to 20 mixture is not necessary. It can be done with just methanol. The initial dilution is an extra cost burden, and so on and so forth, like Antonio has mentioned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? Oh, yes. Oh. Are there any further comments on agenda item number 5? Oh, okay. Lena, I am sending you a request to unmute.
Hello?
Yep, you're on.
Okay, hi. I had a really quick question. I'm not, I touch the flower, but I'm not in a lab, but I did have a quick question in regards to potency. My question is I'm hearing that the testing is on the flower itself. Is that correct? Bueller? Okay, so my question is are there any dirt samples and core samples of the actual plant that is pulled from the ground to test for potency and pesticides, since the THC level is highest at the core stalk of the plant? That's my question for potency, for testing.
All right, thank you. Dale Geringer, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Dale Geringer from CalNormal. I have a general question is, do we have any evidence of that these new regulations have had an impact on the actual accuracy of drug lab testing results? And has there been any thought given to having some sort of blind sampling of uh, different labs to test whether the results that they report back are consonant with what they report on the labels? That is, looking at the actual performance of the labs, as opposed to trying to tell them what to do and hoping that they will do that.
Thank you. All right, Richard Miller, I've sent you a request to unmute.
Thank you, Richard Miller, American Alliance for Medical Cannabis. Just 2 things real quick. What patients are seeing as an inflate intolerance on testing? You'll look at testing and you'll see the test results will say one thing and then they'll post another thing on the packaging and labeling. What I'd like to see is test results be synchronized with the actual test results and see those variances only between the labs, the cultivator, and the state. Those should not be used to inflate the levels on the testing results. And on another issue, I had worked in the photography industry for a number of years, and they had test result little caplets that you could test to use a baseline. Why haven't we figured out something like that for our industry so we could have a baseline for THC tolerance levels? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Marco, I've sent you a request to unmute.
Thank you. So I'm Marco. I work with Digamma, and we've done a lot of cannabis lab validations in different U.S. states, and we just endorsed these changes of the Scientific Advisory Committee, and wanted to make a few comments about some of these things other people have been saying about the spirit of this SB 544. This standardized test method seems to have been done with the intention to stop cannabinoid inflation, which is something that is not quite ideally suited to do in its current form, but the recommendations would help assist that. We think that laboratory audits are essential to address the cannabinoid inflation problem, and are going to be part of an enforcement that is going to be needed to make the issue actually start to go away in the market. Because even when a standardized method is enforced or is performed uniformly, the labs can still manipulate data to produce inflated results for their clients in ways that can only be detected by a secret shopper program or an off-the-shelf testing, and then followed by direct audits of laboratory practices to try to uncover exactly how intentional the inflation was. And I think the mandate of the use of state reference labs is included explicitly in the SB 544 language and is a critical part of both the secret shopper off-the-shelf testing as well as the direct audits. And without that critical piece, it's going to be very hard for either of those aspects of enforcement to have the effect they need to start to actually curb the practice of cannabinoid inflation in the market. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are there any other comments on agenda item number 5? Okay, last call. All right, looks like we can close this agenda item.
We first have to take a vote on
Oh,
the
sorry.
motion on the floor, but then we will close it. So could we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Thank you for keeping me on track. All right. Chair Jamalian,
Aye.
Amber Bauer,
Aye.
Antonio Frazier,
Aye.
Member Christensen,
Aye.
Christine De La Rosa is not with us today. David Woolsey,
Aye.
Dr. Brown,
Aye.
Jeremy Brown is not with us today. Member Shockley,
Aye.
Member Clifford,
Aye.
Member Paulson,
Aye.
Member Tupy. He has stepped out, I believe, for a moment. And Member Payan.
Aye.
All right, it looks like the motion passes.
Thank you. That concludes item number 5. I would say we take a 5-minute break and then come back for item number 6.
Okay,
All right. Is everybody back?
Let me take a roll call. All right. You know, you're back, Chair Jamalian. Amber Bauer, are you back? Member Frazier?
Present.
Member Christensen?
I'm here.
De La Rosa's out today. Member Woolsey?
Here.
Dr. Brown? Jeremy Brown is out. Member Shockley?
I'm here.
Member Clifford?
I'm here. I'm here.
And Member Paulson?
Here.
Member Tupy? He stepped out for a bit. And Member Sarah Pan?
Here.
All right, so we're just missing 3, 4.
Dr. Brown, I'm here.
Oh, excellent. Okay. We are missing Member Bauer, Member Tupy,
Present.
who is that? Oh, perfect. Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. All right, so we do have quorum.
Great. Let's start the meeting again.
All right, so we're going to open up for agenda item number 6.
Yes, correct. Moving on to item 6, temporary events. DCC Deputy Director of Policy and Research, Jacqueline Campion, will give us a brief overview of the statutory and regulatory requirements regarding temporary cannabis events. With that, the floor is yours, Deputy Director Campion.
Thank you, Chair Jamil. Sound check. Sound check. Sound check.
While we're
Think
doing
we
our
have
sound check, a brief reminder to members that under the new Bagley-Keene rules, we do ask that you keep your cameras on during the meeting. Thank you.
Sound check. Getting a thumbs up from Chair Jamilian. Thank you so much. All right, I'll go ahead and proceed. Thank you for bearing with us. We just had a little bit of a sound issue here at headquarters, but our amazing IT crew came through for us. Thank you. Good morning or almost afternoon. This is Jacqueline Campion. I'm the DCC Deputy Director for Policy and Research. DCC is interested in discussion and feedback regarding temporary cannabis events. These are typically multi-day events hosted by cannabis event organizers where people can sell and also consume cannabis. These events may last from 1 to 4 days at a location approved by a city or county. To host a cannabis event, an organizer must have 2 licenses. 1, a cannabis event organizer license, and 2, a temporary cannabis event license. And a note on that, the application for the temporary cannabis event license must be submitted to the DCC at least 60 calendar days prior to the start of this event. A cannabis event organizer is responsible for coordinating all aspects of the event, including maintenance of the event space, hiring security, posting required signage, and providing DCC with a list of participants as well as a diagram that shows the layout of the event. We have frequently asked questions posted on our DCC public website. You can find this at cannabis.ca.gov/licensees/events. We have also provided a discussion document to aid in today's meeting, which outlines the requirements for temporary cannabis events. As cannabis licensing is a bifurcated system in California with both state and local authority, some of those requirements are found in statute, some are in regulations, and additionally, cities and counties may also impose their own requirements. With that quick overview of the materials, I will now turn it back over to Chair Jamilian to kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Could we put the, yes, perfect. Thank you. That's what I was going to ask for. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity and like Deputy Director Jacqueline said, there is the local counties all have different rules regarding their events. The DCC tried to create a framework that now after a couple of years seems to really cater to larger events, 1 to 4 days, like we were just told. So the goal here is really to identify what kind of regulatory recommendations can we make to enable smaller size events, because that's, you know, in the spirit of our whole meeting today, we see that the illicit activities really cut into consumer safety, profits for licensed operators. So, and these events are a big driver of that, probably more so than illegal retail stores. So I would really urge all the members to read these and see if we can come up with some regulatory recommendations around making it easier for smaller event operators to hold smaller events. The floor is open for discussion. And if you look at the statutory requirements, for example, the second point, that's something that already kind of excludes a lot of smaller venues. Events can only be held at a county fair, district agricultural association, or other venue expressly approved by the local jurisdiction. But in order for local jurisdictions to approve these venues, we were told often that it's prohibitive in terms of security or fencing around a larger agriculture or like a venue like Golden Gate Park, for example. But it does seem that the local jurisdictions here could decide, hey, there's a couple of venues that we want to pre-approve for these events. Would that be a correct assumption, Jacqueline?
Requesting backup from our legal team. Does anyone from legal have intel on this?
The goal is really for the public to know, or especially event organizers, where you have to go to your local jurisdiction and ask for change, and what the DCC can do and what this body can do. And this body can only make regulatory recommendations. We can't do anything statutory. And that's why we had asked for this presentation and specifically this delineation here. That being said, if I look at the regulatory requirements, those are all pretty standard. So we have temporary events are limited to 4 days. Retailers are only allowed to conduct cannabis business within a specifically assigned area. This doesn't seem to be an issue for most of the cannabis event organizers. Retailers must display the event location, number, and state license. Sure, all employees have badges. Contract security, provided time cannabis sold. So there, I don't see any requirements about visibility blocks or sort of the actual venue itself. So the DCC does the DCC regulate around the venue itself? Besides obviously the tobacco use and alcohol, but we know that's delineated.
Okay, sorry. Hopefully you guys can hear me now. A few technology problems going on. There are some limits to where it can be. Like obviously we require the premises diagram as part of reviewing an event and look at all of that. But really a lot of it will come down to the local jurisdiction and where they've approved it. So really like when you look at our regulations, there's things like the signs that have to be posted and like, you know, it has to be like a fenced in area. So you can't just walk into it. Like you couldn't have just an open block party, but a lot of that will come from the local jurisdictions and where they approve places to be as well.
So if there was like a brick and mortar venue that had 2 entrances, for example, then that would be potentially an approvable venue. So I think the goal here is knowing that that city of San Francisco is trying to develop some sort of expanded pilot project. What can we do on a state level to make that easier for a lot of jurisdictions? And I really need other members' input here. I'm also tempted to go to public comment before we make any motions and then reopen for public comment, because I do know that there's probably some people that have really valid and good input on this call.
Hi, this is Member Christensen. I think the one thing that you just mentioned, one of the things that might be useful to think about would be if this is determined, if much of this is actually determined at the local level, if there are local jurisdictions who are doing this successfully, you just mentioned the San Francisco pilot, is there an arena or a venue in which to share out information on things that are working well, like ordinance, guidance, information sharing network in which policies that are working at the local level that meet all of the requirements here, something that could be more easily shared and distributed. I don't know if that falls within DCC's scope or whether that would be a different group outside of DCC that would do that. But if there are positive practices coming out from local jurisdictions, it seems like an avenue that could be helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the DCC is having some conversations with some local jurisdictions to sort of look at their different practices. My understanding is that the local authorities that are hesitant to have an event program, it's also because it's difficult to have the bandwidth to license these events, because every venue is different. It's not as straightforward as licensing a facility that went through building permit, for example, or a full, or a build out that's been communicated with the local authority. So I think the idea here was to really listen to the public so we can formulate either a task force or a subcommittee for this, where we can share these kind of findings from local jurisdictions, what's working, what's not. So a subcommittee for maybe the next iteration of this body for events would not be a bad thing.
This is Member Clifford. I would just second that idea. I think I would really benefit, for one, from hearing from the public about where the bottlenecks are, like which of these or other requirements are really getting in the way of having events. I just think we really benefit from that. I have to say, I'm looking at these regulations and looking for things that really jump out at me as unreasonable, and I'm not on their face finding a whole lot. And I would just love to hear kind of more input about what else is out there and what I'm missing.
Yeah, I think to your point, Member Clifford, I kind of feel the same way. Looking at these, it's very different from what I heard from the event organizer communities on all the smaller prohibitive, items or requirements that they have to go through. But when I talk to the city of San Francisco, there just seems to be a lot of passing the buck back and forth between, oh no, that's the state and that's not our problem. So yes, I would actually open up for public comment and urge anyone that is a cannabis event organizer or has experience in this field to please come forward and share your experiences and suggestions on how to make it better. So if we could open up for public comment, I don't necessarily think we'll have motions coming or recommendations coming out of this agenda item. If we do, we can open up again for public comment. But with that, I would like to open up for public comment and hear from the event organizer community.
All right, sounds good. Then we are now taking public comment on agenda item number 6. If you'd like to make a comment on this agenda item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called into the meeting. All commenters will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and each member of the public will have 1 opportunity to speak on this agenda item. So with that, we are going to begin with Fernando Alvarez. I've just sent you a request to unmute.
State licensed cannabis and social consumption events. Following up on my written comment, which I urge the committee to review, The unlicensed and unregulated cannabis event industry is thriving across California and is only growing to meet consumer demand. Cities year over year are seeing declining sales revenue, and with cannabis businesses leading towards the illicit market. I strongly believe that the unlicensed event market is contributing significantly to the overall illicit market. Yet local legislators have been slow to adopt social consumption ordinances. Publicly, they'll tell you that it's not a priority. Privately, stigmatized reasons are kind of dominating their decision making. This is why I'm proposing we expand the local retail access grants eligibility by incentivizing local governments with additional resources to develop and implement licensed social consumption programs. When you have California bills by Assemblymember Quirk, AB 2020, which allows for temporary cannabis events at any venue within the city limits, and then you also have AB 2210 clarifies that any venue with an alcohol license are now eligible. We should be doing more to promote California's leadership in this space. If considered, it will provide us with the political calculus and firepower to re-engage city leaders with a social consumption program that will align with multiple city priorities like combating the illicit market, supporting equity, economic development, tourism opportunities, but more importantly, it will also provide small business and local arts communities the regulatory structure and platform to participate in this new emerging market of cannabis tourism. However, if we continue things as is, with an estimated ordinance approval rate of about 1 every 2 to 3 years of a city, it's simply not sustainable, and we choose to allow this unregulated event market to take advantage of the consumer demand while it's impacting the regulated market and really devaluing the event organizer license. As an operator who's one of the first business licenses in the state of California, I contributed to San Francisco's policy. I've been in the trenches and been advocating for cannabis events and social consumption policy since legalization. I hope my public comment and my written public comment, spurs some new discussions so we can combat the illicit event market with a regulated solution. Again, my name is Fernando Alvarez, founder of Vapor Tent Lounges, state licensed cannabis and social consumption events. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, may be real. Just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I am, as I said before, an equity applicant, and I was the first person in the state to receive an annual events license back in 2018 when you all released the press release. That's to say that I've maintained my event organizer license throughout all of this time. COVID, the first license that I had was under my first cannabis company called High End Society. And then I got another one under my now corporations called Elevate Corporation. During that time, I've had so many struggles. I've sat down with different board members from different event venues, such as Cal Expo up north, and have talked to different cities in hoping that they change their ordinances to allow for smaller venue events. I also dealt with the city of Santa Ana, and they wanted to hold different events, but to hold their events, they wanted you to hire at least 100 police officers to be at that event. And so when you take into the costs of these different things, it's extremely difficult. And the fact that many cities are not looking to host cannabis events, though they'll have something like Reggae Fest where they know cannabis illegally is being sold, they're not looking to, as the man before me said, have that ordinance in, or they put it on the back burner. So I would ask that you all would open up or help or ask the cities to actually put in place some type of smaller venue where we can have a smaller event where it's not as costly, so that those things could actually take place. We do need more events where we can highlight social equity businesses and have a smaller niche type event. If we could do that, that would be amazing.
Thank you. Ryan Whitaker, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
I am a research scientist at the Public Health Institute. I specialize in research on the management of pleasure in societies and the consequences for marginalized populations. Today I'm commenting on behalf of my colleagues in the Getting It Right from the Start program, a research and advocacy program focused on analyzing how cannabis policies can advance social equity and public health. My colleagues are concerned that temporary events in public spaces, including fairs, could impact smoke-free air protections and contribute to the renormalization of smoking for people of all ages. They strongly encourage you to prohibit temporary events held in public spaces. Meanwhile, they do not have strong perspectives on temporary event licenses for indoor private activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Cassidy Anderson, I've sent you a request to unmute. Cassidy Anderson. There you go.
My name is, okay, so
Okay.
my name is Cassidy Anderson. I work for the City of Santa Rosa in the Code Enforcement Division. I'm one of the supervisors here, and I just want to talk from a regulatory standpoint that we've struggled with this quite a bit in our jurisdiction. We have quite a bit of events around 420 that don't qualify for the special event permit under the state. And so each one is always slightly a little bit different, and we scramble kind of around the time of 420. And so one of your members talked about conducting a task force, and I came here specifically to listen to this agenda item, and I'd like to be a part of the conversation. I'd like to hear what other jurisdictions are doing. We kind of bounce every single event from our temporary event section to our cannabis section to it being within the envelope of the building. And so each one is pretty nuanced. And because they only pop up for us a handful of times a year, I just wanted to echo what someone else said about making a mini little task force and me sitting on there and other jurisdictions on how we can better facilitate this for one-day events to help out, the economic cannabis industry and just be more collaborative about it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and Zach Matthau, just sent you a request to unmute. Zach. There you go. Zach, we can't hear you. Oh. All right, Zach was the last one. Let's give it a second. He dropped off, and I'm wondering if he's going to come right back. Oh, we have a new commenter, Katrina Belda. I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Hi, my name's Katrina. I'm from San Francisco. I'm one of the organizers helping with Hippie Hill. Work for Sounds Bizarre. We have a events license with the state and are also working on doing cannabis at Carnival. So one of the two of the three maybe events that do cannabis in San Francisco. Right now, what we're struggling is basically like everything is so expensive. Just to get insurance is for Hippie Hill was, over $30,000-$40,000 for one day. So like we're dealing with having to have full medical teams, which is super expensive, full security, which is super expensive. And I don't know if there's anything. One thing is like our fence line. We have to have a fence line that's scrimmed around every event if it's an outdoor event to block it from public view. So just all of those costs add up. And I don't know if there's any one thing that the state can do or how we can, like the regulatory, looking at those requirements, regulatory, I don't know if there's much we can change there to like make it easier. But definitely on the statutory side, I don't know how to even go about changing those. If you can provide direction, like, how we can kind of ease up on that. We'd love to just treat it like alcohol, and it's easy to get insured for alcohol, and you can have an event and do it anywhere you want with no problems. But when it comes to cannabis, there's all these regulations that are unnecessary for, if we'd love to see where we can go to a bar and buy a beer or a joint at the same time, right? Like it shouldn't be this huge thing with all these requirements just to like sell a little bud at your party. Like that's what we're trying to get to, but I don't quite know that, it takes like, we'd have to adjust the police code, we'd have to adjust the health code, we'd have to adjust like all these things all at the same time. So
Thank you.
Very complex.
All right, Zach, let's try this again. Zach, I just sent you a request to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Hi there. My name is Zach Matthew, and I own a small cannabis farm outside of Garberville in Humboldt County. We have a 5,000 square foot cultivation license. And from a small cultivator's perspective on temporary events, we really need to be able to sell directly to consumers at these types of things. Presently, we're allowed to put things on display at our booth in limited amounts. And then the customer has to go over to a distribution booth and buy from there, and they can have long lines. They can pass another booth and find something else along the way. So we're just really vying and fighting to get customers in that respect. And also another facet of that is we as small producers need to be able to transport our own product to and from these events. Just the logistics become so complicated when you have to take things to a distributor and count on them to handle and process payments and transportation. I'm in Humboldt County, and luckily we've had an increased number of events over the last couple of years, so that's picking up, thankfully. But if I wanted to travel to another county in order to vend my product, it just becomes really complicated. So I feel that for small cultivators to survive statewide, we really need to be able to transport our own products and sell directly to consumers. There's not a lot of small cultivators left. There are less than 25% of us still surviving in Humboldt from the initial number that applied, and we're just really struggling. At the retail level, a pound of cannabis is going at the lower end from $1,200 to $1,600 a pound, upwards of three to 4,000 or more per pound at the retail level, and we're struggling to get $500 a pound at the upper end. So it would we talk about supporting the legal market, and that would be a really crucial step in doing so, in allowing these small cultivators and smaller family businesses to survive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, is there any further public comment on agenda item? Oh, yes, just a moment. Michael Condon, I just sent you a request to unmute.
Good afternoon. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. My name is Michael Condon. I'm calling from the County of San Diego Code Compliance Division. I'd like to also echo Cassidy Anderson's statement regarding developing a task force for local jurisdictions and helping to develop best practices for cannabis events. So we're working on developing those standards in our licensing ordinances, and being able to talk through best practices with other jurisdictions would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Alex Aquino, I just sent you a request to unmute.
Executive producer for the 420 Hippie Hill event. We were also one of the early adopters of getting this license and permits to get consumption and sales at our event, including, pre-COVID, during COVID, kept compliance and all that stuff before we could even have opportunity to do that. So we've been going through the struggles, echoing all the people that were actually commenting on this thing, that there's a lot of over-regulation on this stuff. I mean, we've been ground zero of getting legal cannabis sales in San Francisco, in Golden Gate Park, before outside lands and grasslands. We were the guys who actually pushed that legislation with my district supervisor. We were ground zero from day one, making 420 Hippie Hill safe and clean, and one of the biggest consumption and sales events in California. I would love to be on that task force that another speaker was talking about. Me and Katrina spoke on this, my business partner. We would love to be part of that process. It's overregulated. There's a lot of hoops that we have to jump through, and then at the same time, we're getting, treated as a stepchild with all the city departments. And the Office of Cannabis in San Francisco is one of the most super helpful organizations that are supporting us. But every other department, and it takes years to educate these people on every single city department. Now, 7 years later, everybody's on compliant, but at the same time and supportive of us. But there is over regulation on making these events easier. And so including small events, because I'm an event producer of events you know, as my day job. And so, you know, holding this license annually just to do one event in San Francisco, in my hometown, is crazy. So anyways, I would like to echo all the people that were commenting on this. Zach, you just mentioned, we'd love to have the brands and the farmers go direct to sales, and we would
Thank
love
you.
to support. Thank you.
All right, are there any other commenters on agenda item number 6? It looks like we are out of comments on that, so we can close agenda item number 6.
I think we're going to go back to a short discussion on the floor. The idea was to listen to what the public says and see if there is anything that would inspire us to make a recommendation or put it on the next agenda. It seems like the biggest disconnect here is between local jurisdictions that have a desire to do events and the Department of Cannabis Control, as well as the statutory requirements that make it difficult. So I do think the idea of creating a task force is probably better than a subcommittee, because you would want this task force to be comprised of representatives of local authorities and counties, DCC policy staff, as well as event organizers, right? In order to maybe make some even statutory recommendations at one point or come up with some ideas. I did have a couple more questions for the DCC. One is, it seems like the visibility block from the public came up a few times. Is that a local requirement, or is that statutory and state?
So I will admit, I don't remember. I know it is part of something we put in rulemaking. So I think that is one that, like, I know in our regulations currently, the DCC does require that. And it's my understanding that a lot of local jurisdictions would also have those requirements, but like with everything, it's always that dual system where you would have to comply with state requirements and local. So locals could certainly be even more restrictive than we are.
Right. Um, I I think that the thing is, one side has to start with, with being forthcoming to the event organizers. So, and it seems like the visibility block is a big thing that hinders people from having smaller size events or even finding a venue that they can have it at, right? So that's
Jump in
something.
here real quick. Pardon the intrusion. On the statutory requirements column, it's around the middle. Smoking of cannabis is prohibited in any location where, I'm sorry, the one above that. Cannabis consumption cannot be visible from any public place or non-age restricted area. So that's probably, I think, the section you're looking for.
Correct. That is the section we're looking for. So yeah, that's again, I think most of the problems are statutory. So a task force is really the way to go, because it's also going to be a longer process to change this. I know there's a few assembly members that are very cannabis friendly. Matt Haney introduced the cafe bill. So I do urge the public to reach out to your assembly members and push them to be pro legislation for small cannabis events. I did find it really interesting that a representative of the Department of Health said that they really don't take much issue with indoor private adult events, and that seems to be really the place to focus on, because that would be out of the view of the public.
Chair Jamalian, just to clarify, that was the Public Health Institute, which is not the Department of Public Health, but
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Member Christensen. But it seems like that's a place we could focus on. It seems like it would also open up the possibility for event organizers to find smaller venues, whether that be a restaurant, an art gallery, and places like that, to hold a compliant event. So I would really strongly move towards making a recommendation to create a task force in a fairly timely manner as well. It would be nice to have some sort of streamlined permitting program where a couple of local jurisdictions and the DCC have found a way for next year's 420 festivities. That would really be very helpful to our industry, and a direct-to-consumer sale should also be considered in that.
A question, may I? Dr. Brown?
Absolutely. The floor is open, Dr. Brown.
Point on the statutory requirements. Smoking of cannabis is prohibited in any location where tobacco smoking would be prohibited. And we had just talked about, the smaller private venues. Well, most of those indoor venues, smoking is prohibited. Tobacco, I'm talking about. Tobacco smoking is prohibited in these, let's say a smaller restaurant or even a private venue. I think that's something that needs to be dealt with because that is extremely limiting.
I agree with you. I know that in San Francisco, we definitely differentiate between tobacco and cannabis when it comes to the rules of where you're allowed to consume. I, for one, know that we have several venues with rooftops, for example. But I do agree, that's another big point that needs to be addressed. Also, the equivalency of tobacco and cannabis is not really something that we stand for as an industry.
I know here in LA, we're trying to, kind of whip the vote and educate our city council in preparation for the 2028 Olympics. I mean, we're going to miss so much opportunity if we don't have this settled by 2028. The whole world's going to be in LA and they're going to be consuming. And we can get tax dollars from that and make, safe places for people to consume, or the illicit market's just going to take over. People are going to consume.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Hi, this is Member Christensen. I think one of the things to be mindful of when looking at the statutory requirements and the limits on the tobacco smoking is that California has a clean indoor air law that has been in place for well over a decade and multiple decades at this point. I think that if you are going to try to look at where tobacco smoking can be prohibited, you may also need to start looking at the clean indoor air law, which protects employees, and take that into consideration in any deliberation around that.
Right, sort of the same exact requirements we have for smoking lounges already. Those are mostly driven by the local building departments. If it's an indoor space, you have to have a MERV filter, a HEPA filter, UV filter, certain amount of HVAC, but that's usually addressed in all the lounges. So that's going to be fairly simple to map onto any location because we have a blueprint for what's allowed in a lounge to combat the indoor smoke-free environments. Yeah, so I think I would actually make a motion to make a recommendation to create a task force comprised of representatives of local jurisdictions and counties, cannabis event organizers, DCC policymakers, with the goal to create a streamlined, let's call it pilot project with the participating counties and jurisdictions to allow for small scale events by April 2025. That would be the wording of my motion.
I would second that motion.
Thank you, Sarah. With that, could we open up for public comment, please?
Yeah, we need to restate. Just a moment, let me see if our note taker has.
Sure.
Restate the motion.
Okay, let me restate what I have here. So we are making a recommendation to create a task force comprised of local jurisdictions and counties, cannabis event organizers, DCC policymakers, with a goal to create a streamlined pilot project with the participating counties and jurisdictions. I may have missed a word or two there, Chair Jamali, and I apologize.
I think that sounded pretty accurate.
All right.
Project.
Did you repeat that, Dr. Brown?
Why does it have to be a pilot project?
I think it's probably better to keep it as is. The task force can then define their goal. Maybe we can do better than a pilot project.
You suggest a pilot project. There's not a lot of, interest, or people don't take it so seriously. Funding's not there. I don't know.
We've had a pilot in San Francisco and we just extended it. We extended it also because there was a disconnect between the state and the local jurisdictions, and there's no streamlined process. So the hope is that these pilot projects don't keep getting extended rather than creating a real framework. But if Dr. Brown, if you think that we should add pilot project to the language, I'm happy to do it. I think I just kind of use that word because that's what we call it here in the city.
I'm open. Maybe if there are any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, this is Member Woolsey. In my experience, pilot projects kind of go both ways. But if someone's on the fence on a topic, and they're leaning against having a pilot project can sometimes sway them to see what the outcome is and then perhaps move them to the other side of the fence. If the pilot project is successful, you can extend it. I think the goal for, I think the goal for most people is to not have pilot projects extend. If it works, move it into a permanent thing. If it doesn't work, then remove it. But I think that's where pilots can be helpful, especially in this space where you have some people that are, especially local jurisdictions, where they might be hesitant to just jump on board full speed. They can see a pilot and say, okay, well, there's a definite end date. If this thing doesn't work, then they have an easy out.
Really good point. Should we add that with the goal to create a pilot project to serve as the permanent, or with the hope to turn it into a permanent project, permanent regulation?
Yeah. Thank you, David. That was a good point.
I like that.
So this is council. If I could jump in for a minute, I just clarify. You can make this recommendation to create a task force, but just want to be clear that is going a little bit outside of what the committee can do. Obviously, you can make the recommendation to the department to look into creating that, but really that wouldn't be a recommendation for changing of the rules. So just want to set that out there, that while you can make that recommendation, that would be up to the department to then develop it and see if that's even something that could be done.
Sure. No, I mean, I think we understand that, but it will also be, it will also show the appetite of the department to do this. So if they decide to not have a task force, I think then we would probably mobilize quite a bit of the event organizer industry to get that done.
All right. Are we ready for public comment?
Yes, please.
All right, we're going to open up public comment on this motion. If you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called into the meeting. All commenters will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and you have 1 opportunity to speak on this agenda item. So with that, we will go to Katie Paponiak. Katie, I just sent you a request. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, I just have to say I go with Robin Christensen. We have worked so many years on tobacco-free, smoke-free environments, and I just believe that if you are pushing to have this committee of people, we need to have a public health representative on it as well. Thank you.
All right, P. Walker 323. I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Thank you. I want to ditto what the previous speaker just said. As I understand it, this committee is intended to weigh perspectives on both sides of the issue, not simply act as a promotional arm for the industry. And having worked in the anti-tobacco movement for years to establish smoke-free public places, my concern is these events will undo those years of work, which serve public health. Smoke is smoke is smoke. marijuana or cannabis smoke has many of the same carcinogens and toxins found in tobacco smoke. And these kinds of events were not even a consideration when Prop 64 passed. So I would ask that any task force must and should include members of the public health, medical, or science communities. Thank you for considering that.
Thank you. May be real. I just sent you a request to unmute.
I would love if we did have a task force, and if I could be a part of that, I truly would love that also. Just kind of echoing what we said earlier with the local jurisdictions also, and them streamlining the process. A lot of them do have a lengthy time period before council even approves you being able to have the event, which does cut into a lot of your time and cost. Also, different jurisdictions, which I hope does change soon, a lot of them will not allow you to utilize the other licenses that you have. So as I said, I've had the event license for quite some time, but also had the provisionals for a micro, which include cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution. Now, some jurisdictions say that even though you have this license, you cannot utilize your distribution license and you must use license holders within their city, which I do understand, you know, they want to keep the dollars and blah, 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 but it does cut into our costs and it makes things even more difficult. As far as the smoking thing, I do know of different venues within LA, which hopefully they change the regulations that are rooftop that would allow for something like this once the regulations have been changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Deanna Garcia, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Ooh,
Good afternoon, Deanna Garcia. I want to remind this panel that we just got done hearing about all these different ways cannabis can be consumed. There's the edibles, there's the drinks, there's the vape. Smoking is not the number one thing to get together and do in a venue. You know, people like to get together and use creams, oils for different like yoga, massage. Also, there's drinks for like a high tea. There's several different things that you can consume cannabis, tinctures and drinks, tinctures on food, cooking events. It's not all about smoking. And so I'd really like to bring that to the table that cannabis is not only an inhaled medicine, it is also a consumed medicine orally and through the mouth. And have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kelly McCormick, I just sent you a request to unmute. There you go, Kelly.
Echo the comments of previous callers that if there is a task force, it should include people from public health. We have worked so hard in the state to get smoke-free workplace laws, and it would be a real shame if those were rolled back. And secondhand marijuana smoke is hazardous. It contains substances like mercury, lead, formaldehyde, benzene, hydrogen cyanide, toluene, 3 times the amount of ammonia as secondhand cigarette smoke. So it is unhealthy not only for the users, but those who breathe in the secondhand smoke. And that should be first and foremost if you discuss consumption sites. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Candace Hawes, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Your time today and all the work that you've done with Orange County Normal and also work in many different events. Thank you for taking this topic up. There's many different things within this topic, but just of the things that you guys talked about today, one of the things that's most frustrating that I think is important that this committee, this task force would talk about is the 60-day time period before an event. It's very hard trying to put together an event, raise funds. The fact that you have to have all of your licensees that are going to participate, sell products submitted before the event 60 days ahead of time makes it very hard to raise funds. So that was something that I would very much like to see change statutorily.
Thank you. All right, Ross Gordon, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
I'm the policy chair with Origins Council. We represent about 800
predominantly small producers based in legacy cultivating regions in California, including Humboldt, Mendocino, Trinity, Nevada County, Big Sur, and Santa Cruz. Just want to say we really appreciate this conversation. Think it's really important and critical that we find ways to facilitate small events. And as small producers, this is something that's really important to us to both have access to these events as small producers, as I think has already been discussed, and also really considering the importance of these events just culturally in terms of really bringing forward what the legacy of California cannabis really is. And so really just want to support the overall direction of the conversation and also request that if there is a task force that moves forward, that there be representatives of small producers as stakeholders within that task force also, because I do think our rural areas and small producers have really, a significant interest in this alongside many of the other folks who I know are really interested in this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I see no more commenters on this portion of the agenda item.
Great. With that, we close public comment, and can we get a roll call on the motion, please?
Absolutely. All right, start at the top. Chair Jamalian,
Aye.
Amber Bauer,
Aye.
Member Frazier,
Aye.
Member Christensen,
Aye.
Member De La Rosa. Oh, she's not here. Member Woolsey,
Aye.
Dr. Brown,
Aye.
Jeremy Brown's not here. Member Shockley,
Aye.
Member Clifford,
Aye.
Member Paulson,
Aye.
Member Tupy,
Aye.
and Sarah Pan.
Aye.
All right, looks like unanimous.
Thank you. That concludes item number 6. Moving
This
on.
is Member Clifford. I'm sorry to break in here. I wanted to go ahead and vote aye. I don't want to hold up the proceedings here. I did want to note the request during public comment that, this task force would include the public health perspective. I think it was a reasonable one. And I was kind of assuming that if this were formed that, a variety of perspectives would be represented, but I just wanted to note that.
I don't think it's limited to what we recommended. That's
Fair
sort of
enough.
how I looked at it too, Member Clifford. It's just
Thank
those are the ones that need to really be at that table. But I assume that the task force, if ever formed, will then, assemble itself and make sure that all the right stakeholders are on there.
Just wanted to note that. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you. That concludes item number 6. Or was that 7? Moving on to item number 7, future agenda items. For our next meeting, I think set in June, we'll include reports and recommendations from any subcommittees that meet between now and the June committee meeting. I will also work with the DCC to build an agenda based on evolving conversations, upcoming activities, and some of the things we heard here today. With that, I would like to open up for member discussion if there's anything else that you would like to see on the future agenda.
Hi, this is Member Christensen. We talked about this at the last meeting, but I think I just want to state it again for the record. It would be nice to have an update on what's going on in terms of enforcement. And there's so much that we heard today from so many people, and I know that the DCC is doing a lot of work in this space, and it might be nice to hear from DCC on sort of an update on the enforcement side of things.
Thank you, Member Christensen. Very good point.
I would second that. Thank you, Member Woolsey.
Thank you, Member Woolsey.
Member Payan here. I was wondering if it would be possible to, is it in our purview to make a request for a hemp report to see how much is grown versus how much is sold? And also when we're looking at licensing, how that's counted with a licensing report when licenses go dark. Are they counted or are they not when we look at reports?
So sort of reporting matrix, is that what you would like to see on there? Or specific report about?
Yeah, I think that it would be really good to have that, and also just with, the new license, the opportunity for the licenses to go dark, how is that counted when we're looking at what's going on in the state?
Okay, thank you, Member Payan.
Member Frazier here. May I continue?
Floor is yours. Yes, absolutely.
Um, there was several comments about public getting access to sensitive information like premise diagrams for retail. I think that was possible, but I definitely think there needs to be a conversation about what can be done to protect the retailers that are already struggling out there. If that's a true thing, then I can't imagine, you guys are sitting ducks. So that's one thing I definitely think we should, if we had the purview to discuss, as well as just any potential ideas for the labeling of low dose versus high dose products, because obviously I think as an industry we think people are going to read or may understand, but it does seem like a bunch of novice users even in the legal market have an issue figuring out if something is going to be a low dose or a high dose experience. It's not my favorite topic, but I think if we can put this step forward to give people like normal the confidence that it's not confusing, it could be worth just having the conversation.
Yeah, I definitely also noted retail regs based on what we heard today. It was a couple of things from delivery limits, opening hours, post theft sort of procedures with the DCC. So hopefully there'll be some regulatory recommendations we can make around that. If we have no other suggestions, I'd like to open up for public comment.
All right, we are now open for public comment on agenda item number 7, and that is future agenda items. So if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called in. You will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and you get 1 opportunity to talk on this agenda item. So with that, we will go to Maybe Real. Just sent you a request to unmute.
Good day again. I just want to echo what I mentioned earlier with maybe having some kind of regulatory agency that oversees the cities and what rules and regulations they have in place, especially if they're contradictory to what the state says, i.e. with provisionals. And then also kind of commenting on what one of the members mentioned with dosing. I focus mainly on edibles, topicals, and things like that. I kind of stay away from the smoking part. And with that, you do have a lot of people who don't understand dosing. So you may have one whole cookie and they think that, oh, you can continue to eat a whole bunch of cookies like you would Chips Ahoy, and this isn't that. So having some type of verbiage on the packaging that makes it clear to them that you cannot eat a whole cookie. If the whole cookie is 100 megs, you can literally only have about a bite of cookie, which kind of goes more into educating the masses. And as I mentioned earlier with the events, that's what my goal is to educate people, to have events, yes, but to give them the proper education so that they understand the plant. Many people understand smoking. Okay, you understand, you can smoke a whole joint or whatever, but they don't understand gummies. They don't understand tinctures. They don't understand any other type of edibles. So if we could do that with the cities, also with allocating grant funding and making sure that these cities are actually giving the grant funding that they have to equity applicants and not just increasing their staffing, i.e. with the city of Long Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kathleen Lippett, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Thank you for letting me speak. I would like to echo the concerns of the secondhand smoke laws that have taken so long to put in place, but the suggestion to have it for the future, have DCC look at the embargo procedure, because it does seem like it protects the licensee. However, it puts the community and the public and consumers at risk because they are not aware. And so if those products continue to be out in the public, they will be used before they might be taken off the shelves. So you would have a dual control if the public was also aware. And the provisional licenses, I would respectfully request that there be more oversight on them. It seems like they can be problematic, which can taint the legal permitted permit licensees. And so perhaps maybe an extremely shortened period of time where they are allowed to be a provisional license before meeting the requirements of getting a permanent license. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Draglow, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Yes, this is Jillian Xavier. I'm also social equity with the city of Long Beach. I'm opening a cannabis testing lab. I would like for you guys to put on the agenda to look into the grant situation. GoBiz has given the cities money for social equity, and as it stands, social equity has we're not even in the playing field. We're not even on the ground with anybody. And it's unfair. We're here. I'm in a lease. I'm paying a lease as well. I've been paying for 2 years. I've been paying every month after that and not earning anything. And wanting to get into the business is important that you don't dismiss social equity. We come on here, we speak all the time, but it never gets on the agenda. You need to speak with these cities. $8 million given to the city of Long Beach. Where is the money? Why is it not allocated per license type? They have it per square footage. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter how big my space is. I am opening a successful cannabis testing lab in the city and I need equipment. My equipment don't go on sale because of square footage. You understand? So it's important that you guys put us on the list so we can work it out between these cities that are just sitting there not wanting to help us, as per the mayor saying they don't want to extend any money to us because they don't want to see us grow, which is so
30
unfair.
seconds.
Thank you for your time, and I hope that you really take it into consideration. I'm not going nowhere. I'll open my cannabis testing lab, whether it's in this city or another state, but I'm already here and I need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Whitlow, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Mark Whitlow. All right, one more time. Mark Whitlow. All right, well, we're going to try Zach Matho. I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I would, on future subcommittee agendas, I would like to see what I had mentioned in my previous comment. I know it was not directly about temporary events, but to have cultivators be able to have direct sales to consumers or on site if they're approved for public occupancy or tours. And additionally, in one of the previous meetings, I heard you guys discussing and brainstorming ideas about appellation of origins, and you guys were trying to discuss some kind of a label with trees or imagery and a QR code that describes a specific county where the product came from. And I greatly appreciate that conversation, but it sounded like you guys are kind of trying to reinvent the wheel, and which is I understand because the DCC came into existence a couple years into the industry, but initially when permitting first happened, Humboldt County had a similar program to this, and they already had a small compliant label that could be used as a security seal also, and it had holographic imagery with the county of origin and a QR code. And so I feel like if you guys touch back on that topic in the future, you could reach out to Humboldt County and get input on this type of labeling you guys are trying to create. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, Mark, it looks like you're on.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. We heard a lot of comments about the, how should I say, the labeling that is attracting children. And I'm wondering if there could be a way to have a consortium to deal with that topic. There are bills out there that could be placed to, for example, to merge sort of the hemp market and the regulated market. So a lot of the labeling requirements would transfer over, having that information there, but basically, and also maybe even tracking. The department doesn't have enough resources probably to look into all these cases, but maybe having a public website that basically allows that the public collects that information and say, we're seeing this label in this organization in this product. What can we do about it? What do we know about the organization? Is it licensed by the state HEMPS program? Is it licensed under this program? It's sort of a complaint way of doing this. And, maybe it's a public-private sort of organization. It'd be interesting to sort of explore something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Cassandra Taliaferro, I just sent you a request to unmute.
Hello. I would like to know how the DCC is addressing the oversupply in California. Will there ever be a cap on cultivation? I would also like to see the dominance of indoor cultivation be addressed and the environmental impacts as, this conflicts with California's climate goals. And how is the DCC going to promote and incentivize sustainable cultivation practices? I'm a full sun, outdoor grower, and our carbon footprint for our product is substantially less and much better for the environment than any indoor grown. I'd like the DCC to reassess license fees, as well as create an educational campaign towards consumers on responsible cannabis use, recognizing cannabis as agriculture and equalizing hemp and cannabis regulation, as well as putting Humboldt County back into the qualifying neighborhood for social equity. Those would all be amazing future agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you. Deanna Garcia, I've just sent you a request to, Deanna, you just dropped off. Deanna Garcia, if you have a comment, raise your hand again, please. There you are.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Future recommendations for agenda items. The state put together an equity program, but unfortunately we ran out of money. So therefore, now that we're social equity and we're applying for our license renewal, there's no money to pay for the license renewal. So therefore, they're now just extending us a 6-month leeway. So maybe some further talk about setting more money aside instead of giving it all to the cities, of the state holding on to it, so we can make sure that the social equity applicants are able to get their license fee waivers waived from the state. And then also some more talk on the hemp that is out there and regulating it, or maybe putting a stop to it. If the state of California could put a stop to it and then regulate it and bring it back. But it is as toxic as THC and alcohol. So it's something that is flying under the radar, that is putting a bad shadow on the cannabis industry. And then just fees in general. I know you guys can't help us with the tax, but the fees are very, very, very high. And if we could relook at the fee structure and lower the cost. Thank you and have a beautiful day.
Thank you. All right, last call for agenda item number 7. All right, looks like we have no more commenters on this agenda item.
Thank you, moderator. That concludes agenda item number 7. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you all.